Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the Wilderness Trail Public Engagement Meeting. Hearing a little bit of feedback. Oh, there we go. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about Wilderness Trail, and this is an area over off Westmoreland, if those of you that aren't maybe familiar. Do we have our slides up, Avi? Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay. So this is in District 4. I am Kelly Boatwright, Project Manager for Parks and Recreation. I am the Project Manager for the Wilderness Trail, actually the trails projects around the city. This was part of our 10-year master plan. Number 1 ranked in our needs assessment are trails and bikeways, paved bikeways. So the public talked, we listened, and we're trying to find a way to get these trails to you in the city. So tonight I'm joined with our consultant, CapTech, Joe Capra. In the audience is his project manager, Dylan O'Berry, and on Zoom we have Dr. Barth. So just a few housekeeping items. Your microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. When you'll utilize the Q&A feature, so during the presentation you can ask any questions you like. We will answer those questions at the end of the presentation. And then we will also be putting an online survey out with the recording of this presentation on the website after the meeting. So this will probably be, I'm going to say, the beginning of next week. The recording will be ready, and we'll have that online survey ready for you to fill out. So if you've joined us tonight, we have your email address. We'll make sure that you get notification that that survey is ready for you to take. You're welcome to tell your friends and family to go on and take that survey as well. So our project team, again, I'm Kelly Boatwright. I work for Parks and Recreation. With us tonight, we have my Assistant Director, Brad King, our CRA Project Manager, Jennifer Davis, and we've come to this point in our project with our High Performance Public Spaces team. This is a concept that the city has recently adopted, where the city departments collaborate with a lot of the different projects that we may have going on to try to make these high performance public spaces. And I believe Dr. Barth may talk a little more to that a little later in the presentation. We also have, again, Joe Capra with CapTech Engineering, Dylan O'Berry, his project manager, and Dr. Barth. And with that, do you want me to go through this, or would you like to?
I'll be fine with it.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Capra and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Joe Capper for the record, and I just want to thank Kelly for allowing us to be a part of this team. I'm just going to go through about 5 slides, try to make them very quick, and then we're going to get to the most important part of this meeting, and that is to get input from the public. So, first of all, the slide that you're seeing in front of you, it kind of narrows down what is a multimodal plan that has been developed for the city, and we're going to specifically concentrate on the area of the Wilderness Trail. You can see on the inset in the slide where the star is, that shows you generally the location of the trail and its location. But you can see on that same slide multiple trails and pathways that the city has and various items at destinations around the city that everybody would hopefully find important to travel to, both by multimodal, which means either by bicycle, by motorized bicycles, by cars, whatever, and so forth. So essentially, this is the multimodal plan that we're all working with, and what's most important about this slide, the City Council has ranked this number 1 as a trail that they would like to see put in place as soon as possible. Next slide pretty much kind of talks about that this is not just something that the trail system has come up with. Just so everybody knows, since 2018, the city has had a sidewalk plan, okay? And Wilderness Trail has been on that. It's been more importantly known at the time that this was developed back in 2018 as the Cambridge Drive Trail. But essentially, what that pretty much shows is that this facility was in place, or planned to be put in place, with that 10-year sidewalk plan. And just so everybody knows, that put the construction of this out about in 2027 and 2028, and it was going to be financed through sales taxes. Well, we hope to move that forward, and again, with the help of some grant funding that we have already turned in, we hope to put this plan together a little quicker, and hopefully in the next couple of years, grant permitting, we will be able to put this project together and out there on the street. Next slide pretty much shows you something a little bit about the neighborhood. I think it's important to recognize some general property information. Again, on the main road that goes from the top of the slide to the bottom of the slide and winding is Westmoreland. On the right side, you can see some areas that you can see Morningside. And basically this green area between those areas and Cambridge is really the trail system area that we're going to be talking about this evening. What's in yellow kind of shows some property lines. I think it's important to recognize there's some different ownerships here. Everything that we will be building will be on city property or easements that the city will obtain. It's probably important to note that what's in green there really reflects some wetlands. We're not intending to impact the wetlands. We're intending to do any improvements that we can to the wetlands. There's some lakes also. And again, we just wanted to make sure we're going to be conscious of the environment. We're going to provide a walking multimodal path in this area. And of course, we'll make some enhancements for stormwater and so forth. So it's important to recognize that this is an important public space. Next slide. And I've got about 3 slides to go through here, which is pretty much this slide. What you see is, again, the area in green is where Westmoreland is located. You can see Morningside. You can see the area of the track that we're talking about. And I'm just going to tell you what it looks like today, most of you that know about it. But you can see that as you, on the right side of the area, you have what is the Saints Golf Course. On the left side, in the upper left side of the photograph in the middle, you can also see that there's the Pioneer Park area, the Botanical Gardens. You can see the new boardwalk that the city has built. And so what we're trying to do is tie this area together. What is in green shows you sidewalks and so forth and ways that we can get from one destination to the other. And so what we're talking about, an area of pathway, you've already seen one portion of the pathway be built, which is the meandering sidewalk along Morningside. And you can see the stars along that, and on the right you can see what the pathway looks like. You can see some benches and so forth. You can see some vistas that show some waterways, and that's what's existing today. The next slide shows you the area that we hope to improve on, and in this area, as we look along Cambridge Drive, you can see some important slides of vegetation. You can again see lake areas that will have some vistas, and there are a variety of enhancements there. The sidewalk, of course, can go in various locations along this area, and Dr. Barth will go through them with you in a minute. But the fact of the matter is you can see what it looks like today with these pictures. As we go to the next slide, pretty much, and some other items that are in this location is some drainage ditches and so forth. And I just want to make sure everybody recognizes that we will improve upon those ditches in the area that we can. Obviously, as we do an enhanced public space, we probably could be doing things like bioswales and so forth. But the intention is not to block these areas. The intention is to enhance these areas. And again, we'll cross these sidewalks with some sort of culvert or some bridge looking opportunities to make it look like an attractive trail in this area. So those are things that we see out there today. At this point, as we go into the next slides, I want you to know that we're going to turn this over to Dr. Barth, and this is probably the most important part of this meeting, and that is to come up with, he's the one that's been instrumental in coming up with the citywide trail network, and tonight he wants to gain your public input on what the residents want in this trail system. Dr. Barth?
I did the classic Zoom thing. I started talking while I was being muted. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Kelly, can you?
Yep.
Okay, great. So it was great turnout. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're going to talk about, we have 3 polling questions, and think about it like you were furnishing your house. We're first going to ask you about what activities you would like to do along the trail. And these are all passive activities. There are none of these that are active. Active would be things like basketball courts and football fields and soccer and everything we're talking about are just amenities. So think about furnishing or what would you like to do in your house. And then the second was about amenities. What types of amenities, as if you were furnishing. And then we want to talk about routing. There's different ways that we can run the trail. The original sidewalk plan just showed it running along Cambridge. But there's other opportunities that may be far more interesting and enjoyable for you. And so we want to run those by as well and see what you think. So what we're going to do is I'll tell you the question, and I'll show you 2 or 3 slides of examples. And then Avi's going to pull the poll up, and you can click on as many of these as you want, or none if you don't like any of them, whatever you wish. And then we'll see what the thoughts are of the group. So that's in this COVID area. This is how we're really getting public input, is through these polls. And as Kelly talked about, then we'll open it up for question and answers afterwards. So let's give it a shot. So first one talks about activities, right? So some of these things don't require you to do anything. Some of them you lay in the grass. Some you do along the trail. But this is a list of what we think of as passive activities that you and your friends and family might enjoy doing along the trail. And so I'm going to show you some photos of some of these and then ask you to click on any of the ones that interest you. So you can go to the next slide. So you can see different ways of bicycling. One opportunity we have when we show you the different routing, if we don't just follow the roadway, we have the opportunity to maybe do some boardwalks and some bridges. Things are a little more interesting. That's the photo on the left. And then you have just the idea of nature watching, bicycling, jogging. Some people might enjoy, a small group getting together for fitness or yoga or meditation. And then you just have the idea of even, having chairs down there already, or that you bring your own chair. I do that in the green space near my house, just sit out and sit in the sun and watch people. So those are some of the activities on this first slide. Second slide, picnicking on the grass, the upper left. You could go a little bit further. You could do picnic tables, playing with your kids. And so playing could be just running around the grass, or playing could be, a playground. And what's happening, by the way, in trails design around the country, people are looking for more and more amenities on a lot of their trails, more things to do. So that's why we want input from you all. You have reading. I can lay in the grass and read. I don't know if any of you go down and use it that way now. You have benches and sitting and reading and people watching. Then you go to the third slide. And then again, along with walking and bicycling, a lot of people used to be more involved in rollerblading. It's coming back a little bit, but I don't know if there's any interest in skating. The middle one is just meeting up for friends and socializing. People in my neighborhood will gather around. A lot of people will bring chairs and just sit out in the green space and chat. So it kind of creates this public space to get together. You could do small events, whether it's this one on the upper right just shows the idea of having a small band come in, or a Sunday afternoon concert or something. It can be a very small event. It doesn't have to be very large. You got the lower left again of classes, and you've got walking and walking with your dog. So those are all activities, again, that are considered passive activities. And so the poll's going to come up, and you can click on as many of these as you wish. And there's, Avi, how many slides are there on this one? I think there's 2, correct?
That's correct. There's 2 questions.
Yeah, we're limited to 10 per slide. So click on as many of these as you wish, or as few of these as you wish. And then when everybody is ready, if you're done clicking, when obviously as people have participated, then we'll go on to the next one. So this one just is asking you, what activities would you or your family enjoy along the Wilderness Trail? I had somebody the other night wanted to play Jeopardy music while we did this. So Kelly can hum it if you wish.
I'll let you hum it, Dr. Barth.
No, I don't think you want me to do that. So. And by the way, if you need to scroll down to get to the bottom of this, if you didn't know that already. So you can scroll down to the last one is socializing on this one. Avi, do you have to click to go to the next one, or do they just scroll down?
They just scroll down on the same poll.
Okay.
They'll see the second.
All right,
they'll see
so
the
I
second question.
don't know, can you go, can they see my screen if I move it?
No.
All right, can you go ahead and show everybody how they scroll down and they can see the list continues?
Well, they don't. It doesn't share that way. They don't
Okay,
see,
all
they
right,
don't see my
all right, I'll be quiet.
We're going to give this poll about 10 more seconds. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that out.
And if you scroll down, you'll see the results for the second question as well.
Like we have a lot of walkers in the group, 97% of the second question. Oh, okay, so
Yep.
I see. Well, we have 81% like bird and wildlife watching of the first question.
Yep.
So
You may like the trail closer to the wooded area, right? Forested
maybe.
area and the
That
lake.
may-
We shall see.
we shall see.
All right, you want to go to the next one? Or are we done yet?
Okay, yep, we're done with that poll question, so
Okay.
we'll go to the next one.
Right. Okay. So if you think about activities, then we start asking about what amenities do we need to provide to allow you to enjoy those activities. So it's a kind of subtle difference. It's a different way of asking kind of the same question, but these are the kinds of things. What activities would you like to see that would enhance your experience and make it more enjoyable for you? And let me go through that slides for a minute. So you have, all kinds of seating. You have on the upper left is just typical traditional standards. You have some communities that are really adopting colorful benches, Adirondack chairs, different kinds of seating. So seating can range again from very, very traditional to very contemporary. The one on the right is a community garden. So some folks are building community gardens along trails. They don't take much space. And it's another way for the community to come together. This is probably as close to active as we get, which is the idea of some disc golf holes. So if you like that idea, I don't know if any of you have played disc golf, but it just requires a basket and some Frisbee-like discs, and you're throwing your disc into the basket. We have drinking fountains, both for humans and for pets. And then the idea of public art, right? So those are some of the amenities. And there's some really cool public art along different trails around the country. Go to the next one. And then we have, just like on Crosstown, you have fitness stations. So these have become very popular. That's the upper left, very popular along trails. You have public art again. You have different kinds of play facilities, for both adults and for kids. So some care of fitness, but just different kinds of play equipment. You have restrooms, storm drains. So I'm going to take a little bit to explain the one in the bottom middle. This one is of a rain garden. This is a park in Kissimmee, Florida. And the idea is that there's enough property on the trail that we can also look at how we use the property to hold and treat stormwater before it's released. So the idea is that parks and trails and green space can start doing more to ensure clean water and to improve the quality of the river. So the idea on this shot, this is a rain garden that drains and treats water that comes off the street and stores it in a rain garden, which is just a beautifully planted treatment facility, or a pond. In this case, it's dry, but seasonally water gets into it. And then you have the idea of picnicking goes up a notch if you do, say, picnic shelters, where you may want to do a family picnic or a small get-together. So, all right, go to the next slide. So go ahead and we'll pull up the poll. And if you'll do the same exercise, and I think there's just one of these, obviously take up two.
Yeah, there are two on this one as well.
Okay, so yeah, if you would go ahead and just click on any of the facility or the amenities that you think are desirable to enhance your experience. I didn't talk about dog waste stations, by the way. I assume everybody in my family, we talk about it's where you get poop bags. So in my neighborhood, it's a place to deposit dog waste and to pick up some dog waste bags if you're walking your dog along the trail, and it helps keep it clean. I also didn't talk about environmental and historical exhibits. There was a slide that I glossed over, but you can do different kinds of small exhibits, sometimes with a QR code that ties into more information on your phone. Just talking about the ecosystem, or talking about wildlife, or talking about history of the community. And they can, they can be pretty subtle, but that's another amenity.
We're going to give that poll about 10 more seconds before we close it out. And just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions that you think of during the presentation, you are more than welcome to type those into the Q&A, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end of the meeting, or at the end of the presentation. And we're going to close that poll out. Okay.
So a lot of support for benches.
Benches, yeah.
Dog waste stations, drinking fountains, exhibits, fitness stations, public art. Great.
Great.
Okay. So this one, and I'm giving a heads up to either Avi or Kelly, we'll need somebody to use their cursor potentially as we go through these alternatives, just to show people the routing. But there's no one way to, if we were just doing a straight sidewalk, we may say, well, just follow the road. But for a lot of people, that's actually very boring. It's not much of a trail experience, but that's still an option. So we just did 5 quick sketches of showing different routes. And the bottom 2 have loops. So it's not just a single route, but you can do some loop trails. The first 3 are just different routing through. And we'd like your opinion. Again, we haven't done a detailed site analysis. We need to make sure we stay out of the wetlands. But as I mentioned, possibly in some places we may do a small bridge. We need to make sure we stay off of private property. So, but these are just quick, what we call bubble or conceptual diagrams, just to show you some alternatives. So we'll go a little bit slower on this one and just show you the different features. And Joe, you're welcome to pop in as well. So, all right, so the first one, if you go to the next slide, simply took the idea that was the original sidewalk plan and said we would run the trail along Cambridge Drive. It's pretty straightforward. Now, the idea is that it connects to other trails, right? This is not just a single standalone trail. The idea is we're building a network for the city. And as you all know, Port St. Lucie was developed as pretty much a retirement community, a lot of cul-de-sacs, a lot of dead ends, not particularly an interconnected network. And so when Joe talks about multimodal, we're not talking about automobiles for the trails network. We're talking about bicycling and walking. So what the goal is can we help make up for maybe the lack of connectivity of some of the roads by over time having a connected trail system that allows you to move around the community by bike or walking. So this one, again, this network or this trail corridor could just go along Cambridge, and it would again connect to all these concepts would connect to other trails to let you go other places. And I think everybody knows where Pioneer Park is. Joe, if you want to point that out, just some of the destinations around the park. So Pioneer's up there on Westmoreland, and they have botanical gardens. The idea is to allow you to leave your home, not have to get in your car, but go to some of these destinations over time. All right, so that's the first option. Go to the next one. Second one just takes it, but it meanders a bit over, instead of along Cambridge, it meanders over along the wooded areas, but there would be what Joe refers to as ticks. The idea would be their connections back over to Cambridge. So the idea is you could come down from your neighborhood if you live adjacent to the park. I say the park and the trail. If you live adjacent to the park, and you'd be able to cross over to that trail. It wouldn't be that you would walk across the grass necessarily. There could be some connections. But the trail experience would be more removed from the roadway and a little bit more natural in terms of the scenery and the environment. You'd be looking at trees and wetland and woods as opposed to staring out the drive and homes. So that's the meandering along the wooded edge concept. So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and Dr. Barth, just so we've put some symbols there, we could add more or less, but on both of the previous, both this slide and the previous slide, you kind of see some symbols of a walker. Basically, there could be a path from that location, possibly a crosswalk of the roadway if we needed to, meaning a painted crosswalk or something like that to guide people to these areas. And you see them on several locations. You see a star there. That's a narrow area that crosses over a lake area. Possibly there could be something that looked like a bridge. It may be just culverts that have some kind of cladding on it and something that's more attractive. It could be kind of a raised bridge area. And so again, we were trying to get you closer to the environment. I noticed in the first list of things that people wanted to do was look at wildlife. Obviously, that would get you closer to the wildlife.
Right. It's hard to see it as much on the road. So this one is what I call a hybrid scheme, right? It's neither adjacent to Cambridge all the time, nor is it adjacent to the woods all the time. It meanders. So it takes advantage of the fact that you have a large parcel there. And so some of it's near the road, and then it meanders over the woods, and it may cross over the water and then meander back. And so it's really a hybrid between number one and number two. Go to the next one. Next one says that, and you're going to see exactly the same as the first two. This one starts along Cambridge, but allows you to go do loops along the wooded area, right? So if you want to just go from point A to point B, you may stay along Cambridge. But if you want to meander, you have a couple of ways to do it. The nice part about loops is you can have a different experience every time, right? So one day you do like a figure eight, another day you do a small loop, but you stay along Cambridge. It gives you more choices. And it allows for different experiences at different times of the year. All right, and then the next one is also loops, but instead of sort of the baseline being along Cambridge, you can go to the next slide. Oop. Did we miss one?
No.
We're on the fifth one
that's
right
the
now,
one.
so
Go back to 4 if you would.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, sorry, I missed 5. Go ahead, go to 5. Yeah, so this one just a little more off of Cambridge, and so it's a kind of a combination of the meandering and the loops. So not quite following Cambridge. Where 4 was the walkway along Cambridge, the loops off of it. This one is more of the slight meander with loops. So a fairly subtle difference, but probably more of a natural feel to it. So even if you stayed on the route closest to Cambridge, you'd still be meandering a bit, not just right along the roadway. So the polling question is going to come up. In this case, you're going to just pick one, right? So you're going to pick the route that you think would provide you with the most enjoyable experience. And this is not, by the way, the largest number of votes wins. It's a way to get your input and see what the interest is. So we have a lot of analysis to do yet.
We're going to give that poll about 10 more seconds before we close it out. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that one out.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'll have to tell you that one's my favorite as well. So cool.
Mine too.
And part of what we'll have to do is figure out how far the budget can go, but it can always be phased. Okay. So Kelly, back to you.
All right, so with that.
Thank you all for participating.
Yes, thank you so much for your participation in the polls. And with that, we'll start answering some of the questions that have come through. The first one we had was, it pertained to that walking with a dog was not an option on the survey. So what I would say is we're going to put a survey out with the recording of this presentation, probably early next week. Everyone that has joined this presentation will get the email saying that that survey is ready. So if there's anything on the survey that you did not see that you would like to see in this on this trail, you will have an option. There will be an open-ended question on there that you can fill that in.
And by the way, that was an oversight on our part, because clearly, when we were talking about dog waste stations, that's the intent, that you be able to walk your dog on a leash, and I would think for a lot of people that's one of the main reasons that the trail is desirable. So.
And the next question we have is, when would any development be starting? So in answer to that, we have recently put in for a grant, the RTP, Recreation Trails Grant. We hope to hear from that probably this summer, maybe early fall. We also have requested funding in next year's CIP. So we're hopeful that we might be able to start construction or development on this trail probably early 2022. And our next question, does the plan consider minimizing the impact upon the Visconti community, which shares a property boundary? In other words, will the crowds and travel be kept away from private property and possible intrusion? Also, is parking being considered? And I will let either Joe or Dr. Barth take that one, please.
Well, a couple of people have asked about parking, and so let me address that first. This is, again, part of a citywide trails network. And so one of the things we still need to do is identify where there would likely be trailheads. The most likely candidates are at existing sites like the Botanical Gardens or Pioneer Park. The idea is that if I'm living in the city and I want to take my bike for a couple hours, I may at different times decide to start somewhere else. And so we need a place for you to be able to take your bike. So we're that's still something that's got to be worked out as to where would be appropriate trailheads. Usually, on most trail systems, are about every 4 or 5 miles apart. You're looking for a place where people can park, and the typical ingredients for a trailhead are some parking, a kiosk that shows them where the trails go, and maybe a drinking fountain and a restroom. Those are kind of the standard amenities. So that's what we're looking at. Where we will look at where there are existing parks that can accommodate parking if they don't already. Someone else should address the specific neighborhood. My experience is there's typically with a trail, you don't have people who are meandering into adjacent neighborhoods. They're out there to enjoy the trail. But if somebody wants to address that in more detail.
Well, the couple things, if you notice some of the plans, we obviously kept ourselves away from the neighborhoods in some sense, in the sense of like the Visconti area, because we have that great buffer area where you have vegetation and wetland areas and upland areas, and so obviously our intent is obviously to recognize their neighborhood, but at the same time we want to recognize the residents along Cambridge and so forth. So I think the placement of the trail will consider both of those. Obviously the things that are important about a trail like this is safety and security and so forth, and this property does have some areas where there's some low rises and some little higher rises and so forth. So you want to make sure that it's visible from areas so people feel safe. But I don't believe any of our intention is to open up any areas that currently aren't already opened out there. If anything, we may probably add some more vegetation. And I kind of look at experience that we've had in other parts of the city, maybe Woodstock Trail, for example, where we are next to residential neighborhoods, and we've kind of kept some nice buffers there, and we put some nice vegetation around to protect the integrity of what the land looks like today, but also enhances it. I think in general about the parking, as Dr. Barth has stated, we obviously want to encourage people to walk, and obviously they may come to maybe the Botanical Gardens or Pioneer Park and basically park in that area, and then they can ride down here. We've shown on the map quite frankly, the timing to walk these areas, 12 minutes, 7 minutes, 25 minutes. The ones with the loop, I think, was like 37 minutes. So there's not a long period of time of walking that's planned for this trail, but it also provides enough exercise for people, and it's not a very long distance to those places like the Botanical Gardens and Pioneer Park parking areas. I mean, again, we could talk about parking areas in the area, but it didn't look like that was probably something we would encourage unless we had some reason for that. But
Thank you. Okay, so our next question is, would the trails be wide enough to accommodate a golf cart?
It's proposed as a 10-foot trail. There's probably the bigger question is going to be what's the city's policy about golf cart usage, and we haven't discussed that yet among ourselves. Kelly, do you have an answer for that?
I know that with the RTP grant, it was applied for as we were going to design this trail for non-motorized use, but multi-purpose use. So I believe that that stipulation would mean that golf carts wouldn't necessarily be considered for this trail.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so our next question is, will you consider bike racks to lock bikes, also sails or shaded areas of walkway?
Absolutely, the bike racks, and you tend to provide bike racks at trailheads. So again, that's a question of where are they placed. It doesn't make sense to litter the trail corridor with bike racks. Ideally, you want to have them where people plan to leave their bikes. So we have to decide where those go. I had never even thought about shade over sections of walkway. Normally, we would do that over fitness equipment or play structures, but it's an interesting idea. But we haven't talked about that yet.
well, I think the way that the current sidewalk, meandering sidewalk along Morningside, it was strategically placed, of course, to provide some shaded areas. And so I would assume anything that we planned here, we would encourage that. That would obviously, in this corridor, would probably put it closer to the wetland, upland areas that are already vegetated. But at the same time, there's certainly areas that we can plant with trees to provide the shading as we place a location, for example, a bench and those type of things. So I do think that it would be an important feature to provide some kind of shading. It doesn't necessarily have to be a shade structure. It could be something natural, like some vegetation.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, how long in miles would there be markers for distance like quarter mile, et cetera?
Joe, you want to talk about the distance, and I'll be glad to talk about markers.
Well, and I'm just going to go to the shortest distance was about the 5,200 range of linear footage of sidewalk. That's the one that's pretty much closer to Cambridge. And then we got into the ones with the loops. We had up to 8,800 feet. So I assume it's a matter of that's the range that we have.
Okay, so that's a mile to a mile and a half.
That's correct.
Such plus or minus, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So for trail planning, by the way, normally most people are looking for about a 5-mile experience when they're doing point to point on bikes. Walking, a mile and a half is great. And there's a second part of that question. The marker. So I love putting very subtle. I actually like mile markers that are done like in discs that are embedded in the pavement, something with the city's logo on it, as opposed to things that are more obvious. But there's all kinds of ways to do mile markers on trails, and I think it adds to people's experience, right? They can try for a half mile, and they can try for a 3/4 of a mile and a mile. So the answer is yes, and I think we should add that to the amenity list about having mile markers.
Thank you.
Who's the coyote expert on our team?
I don't know, but we have a question or a concern about the coyotes that are living in the woods there. They are already killing the pets
Yep.
and coming across Cambridge. Will we be hiring a trapper to remove them?
I don't think we know the answer. So I know we have coyotes in my neighborhood. I believe they're fairly shy. So if there's more people, there's probably fewer coyotes. But I don't know anything about coyote trapping. Is that something that we need to look into and get back to them, Kelly?
I would defer that to Dylan. Did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, the coyotes that are commonly found in this area, I mean, maybe might on occasion pass through those woods, but maybe at the 3 o'clock in the morning hour, but not necessarily living there permanently. They're usually passing through as they going from probably the savannas, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Brad, did you have anything to add to that, maybe?
Only in that if there is evidence of a coyote problem, we definitely need to be made aware of that, and we can research what the city is able to do by checking with Florida Wildlife Commission to find out how to address that issue.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question, what would the plans be to allow folks to safely cross Westmoreland to Riverwalk? Good question.
Okay, so we have looked at a little bit of that. As you know, we recognize that, first of all, where this trail would access Westmoreland at, say, for example, at the Cambridge intersection, we recognize that's right in a curb. So we do not believe that would be a great location for a crosswalk for Westmoreland. So our intention is to move it up closer to the Palm Beach Road Anchorage Cove entrance, and you can see that's been depicted by a symbol, recognizing we would obviously have to place the crosswalk in a safe location. There's standards for that. It could be a lighted crosswalk. It could be just a painted crosswalk. We've done various options of that. It could be have a flashing light above the pedestrian crossing, so people know that people would cross typically at that location. So it's our intention initially here that we recognize the fact that we're in the middle of a curb at Cambridge at Westmoreland, so we would move it closer to the Pioneer Park area at the Palm Beach Road area. Obviously, the next symbol place or crossing would be, of course, at the entrance to the Botanical Pioneer Park area, which currently has a signal at that location. But we recognize there needs to be a safe crossing at the Palm Beach Cove and Anchorage Cove area.
Thank you. Next question, when will the existing boardwalks be connected under Port St. Lucie Boulevard?
Well, I think that's certainly a matter of the fact that we are putting that boardwalk along the river, which takes some permitting, but also we are crossing a DOT right-of-way, which they currently have some bulkheads that are being repaired. But our best guess on that location, or that boardwalk being complete, is somewhere between April and November of 2022. So by the end of 2022 is hopefully when it will be completed.
Thank you. So our next question, was an option considered that meandered within the wooded area?
So that was an option I thought about, but I don't have enough data yet about is the wooded area high and dry? Would we have any negative impacts to the habitat? So as we study it further, that'd be something we would definitely want to look at. We would need to make sure that there are still good sight lines, right? So that people feel safe and secure and they don't feel hidden from the road. But I think all of us enjoy meandering in and out of woods on trails. And so it's something we ought to look at and see if we can do it safely without having any negative impacts.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. What is the length of each trail route?
I think Joe already addressed that we have ranges from a mile to a mile and a half or so. Joe, you have anything to add to that?
Just on the maps, and we'd be happy to share them with the public, but basically the first option, so everybody knows, that was about 5,280 feet, right? That was the first one along Cambridge. The second one that put it closer to the wooded area was about 6,000 feet. And we did put some timing of how much time it takes to walk those areas, if you'd want me to tell you that. But the fact of the length of them, then we had one that was kind of between Cambridge and the wooded area, and that was about 5,600 feet. And then we had the loop. The first loop one was 8,820 feet. And then the second looped area was about 8,500 feet. So those are the lengths that we have here. Like Dr. Barth mentioned, a little over, from a mile to a little over a mile.
Thank you. I would also mention that, again, we are going to post this presentation on the website after we're done, so it'll probably be early next week. And you can go back through and you can look at all these trails and on the slides. You can look at those distances and those walk times because they were all notated on the slides. So the next question, are motorized vehicles allowed on the bike walking trails?
So no, we already answered that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, next question then.
Yeah.
Apologies. Older residents cannot walk great distances, and they like to watch wildlife. So is some consideration given so they can park and have a nice short walk?
Yep. So this is a great question, and it's tricky. On one hand, this is a part of a citywide trails network. On the other hand, we want to make sure that we're not negatively impacting the neighborhood. And so parking is oftentimes a sensitive subject. You could do a small parking area at one end of the corridor. You could do a couple of spaces along the street. You could actually build a couple of on-street parking spaces. But then nothing to say they can be reserved for people who are 55 and older. It'd be almost impossible to maintain that. So that's something we'll have to talk about more. If people have opinions, they probably ought to let us know their thoughts about that. But, as we move into the design phase, because I appreciate the intent. There's certainly, once you get there, with the loop corridors, there's ways to take nice short walks. There may not be an easy way to have parking near those. And so that's something we'll have to take a look at.
Okay, so we have more of a comment, but I will ask it more so as a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead. I can answer that one.
Okay, so this property was turned over to the city to be used as a passive park. I'm not sure why anything is being done on this land at all. I see in the pictures you are presenting there is a musical group, disc golf, pavilions. These are not passive. A walking trail would be passive, but once you put restrooms and drinking fountains, sounds like we are losing the original intent of this property.
So, everybody's got a different opinion about what is passive versus active. As somebody who's been involved in parks and recreation planning for 40 years, the commonly accepted definitions for active are things that require facilities to engage, tennis courts, basketball courts, ball fields, etc. The other things are what we consider amenities. They're not considered active at all. So a place for you to sit in the shade and have a picnic is not considered active. Disc golf is probably that gray area in between. That's a real question whether people want disc golf or not. That's something that we put out there just to see what people thought. And the trail design isn't contingent in any way on disc golf. Everything else, though, is really considered passive recreation. So we appreciate the concept of keeping it passive. But again, almost everything that we're showing is considered a passive amenity.
Brad, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Dr. Barth, if I could add to that,
Yeah.
just so that everybody is clear and singing off the same sheet of music, from the city acquired this property in June of 2000 and by way of quit claim deed. And the language of the quit claim deed is quite clear in that the property was to be conveyed to the city for the purposes of a recreational park. So there is restrictive language in the deed that basically says no ball fields, lighted ball fields, but it's very clear that the intent of the conveyance of the property to the city was to have a recreational park. Now, I agree with you, keeping the site passive and having the passive uses is what we're here tonight to discuss. In no way are we proposing, lighted baseball fields or things of that nature. But the language in the quitclaim deed is quite clear that it's to be used as a recreational park.
Thank you. So our next question is, any preliminary plans for new trails off the newest boardwalk by the Botanical Garden? As a matter of fact, there is. In the preserve, we have what we're calling, we actually, when we applied for the Recreation Trails grant, part of that application was to make the connection to a trail that is planned for the preserve area. And Jennifer, did you want to add to that?
Just a quick answer. If
Sure.
you wanted to go to the cityofpsl.com/the port, we do have a map in there that shows the proposed trails for the preserve track as they are planned for right now.
Thank you. Any lighting plans along the trail?
We haven't discussed that, and we haven't discussed the citywide policy of the Trails Network. Generally, trails are not lighted, but that's, again, something that should be discussed. Unless you already know the answer, Kelly.
We haven't made any plans to light the trails in this park, and I don't think, the idea behind this trail design is that it may potentially become the pilot for all of the trails within the city. So if we light this one, then potentially we would have the ability to light others, but, or if we put that in this design, we may light the others and not light this one, just based on what the want or the need is in any particular area. So I don't want to say that we're not going to light any trails, just because throughout the city there may be areas that do require some lighting along the trails. At this time, I don't believe we have any intention of lighting the one along Wilderness Trail, though.
And your typical park hours are dawn to dusk?
Right, correct, in the neighborhood parks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the closest comparable to me is generally trails are dawn to dusk.
Right. Okay. So our next comment is, normally dogs are not allowed in parks and beaches unless specifically designated, allowed like a dog park or a dog beach. Is this the same for trails? Does the city have to specify if dogs are allowed on a specific trail, or are they always allowed like on sidewalks? Brad?
Yes, Kelly, thank you. Chapter 96 of the City Code is the chapter that regulates rules and regulations for park properties. In it, it states that dogs are prohibited in parks with the exception of parking lots and sidewalks immediately adjacent thereto. However, that original code was written probably 30-plus years ago, and we know we as a society have changed, and that dogs have become very much a part of our families. And a lot of places that used to prohibit dogs from being on the property, they have since changed. We are considering, as we revise Chapter 96 of the City Code, we are considering allowing dogs to be allowed in neighborhood type facilities or dog parks, where we've actually constructed 4 or 5 dog parks in community parks throughout the city. So we have actually changed over the years about allowing dogs in parks. So to answer your question, in sum, I would say that if we post the trail as being dog friendly by the order of the Director of Parks and Recreation, we could allow that. And if we obviously do that, that would therefore demand the need for having doggy waste stations.
And the dog on leash, correct?
Correct, on a leash, right.
Dog friendly, yeah.
Not to be free running.
Yeah. So we may also want to talk about whether there's just a separate trail policy that's dog friendly with dogs on leash. And so.
Thank you. Our next question, can the trails be made pervious as opposed to concrete?
That's a Joe question.
Well, we have looked at various options for trails. We've made some of them out of rubber. We've made some of them out of mulch. We've made some of them out of gravel. And obviously, this one here, we have submitted as a concrete trail. The things that we would look at, whether of the texture, certainly it's a matter of what the public prefers, but one of the things that we would make sure this trail accommodated would be handicap people. So the surface would have to be allowed for handicap accessibility and so forth. So there's various ways to do that, and I won't say it has to be concrete. Some around the community, some trails around the city are asphalt. We tend to be taking them out and replacing them with concrete. But at this point, I don't think we've made a final decision. However, we are tending to lean towards a concrete trail here.
I think it has to be a hard surface. And the very fact these are multimodal and multi-use, they've got to be concrete. The question, Joe, is, are there some pervious concrete products that we ought to look at, or have those been proven to be useful at all?
We have used there's, as far as pervious materials, we've used a rubberized pervious material on paths, on trails. We've used a pervious concrete. Obviously, that allows the water to seep through the concrete itself, and that's a very good product. We've used that numerous times. There is pervious asphalt out there. I would probably, and we've also used pervious pavers. As you can imagine, these do tend to get more expensive, but there's a variety of pervious materials that we can use. I would suspect that they're all going to be rather expensive. And again, another thing that we want to be conscious of is the maintenance aspect of this. We are going to be placing this potentially near trees and so forth. We obviously want to be careful that we provide some root barrier for the vegetation, but at the same time, having a pervious material tends to require that we have to clean it more often and make sure we vacuum it so that the water will seep through it and so forth. So I don't think anything's out of the question. I just think that when we weigh the cost of maintenance as well as the cost of building it, we may find and the fact that we may want a longer trail. It appeared from the comments that we saw the loops were a good idea, which is a longer trail. We may be going to the concrete simply for that reason. So it's certainly up to what the public wants and how much money we have to accomplish the trail that we're talking about.
Thank you. So our next question, do you have any information about the impact the new trail will make to the local wildlife?
So I'd like to start, and then if somebody has more information. We haven't done any type of detailed wildlife assessment that I know of. Right now you have a heavily manicured, mowed grass area. So there's a lot of disturbance, a lot of activity. I've not heard anecdotally of any threatened or endangered species or that's nesting there. Kelly and Brad, have there been any studies done that you know of that talk about what wildlife is there currently that may be impacted by the trail?
Dr. Barth, I'm not aware specifically of any study that's been done. I will acknowledge that given the longstanding vacancy of the property and it's next to a water body, it would not surprise me if there were, what's the word, the bird I'm looking for?
There's wood storks and there's...
Well, wood storks and sandy hill cranes and the other birds that use the area for hunting and nesting. In addition to that, I'm sure there's the small mammals that can be found, raccoons, rabbits, possums, armadillos, things of that nature. But truthfully, we've got parks, active recreational community parks all over the city, and you'd be surprised at the amount of wildlife contained inside those parks. So to answer your question, we certainly are not intentionally designing a trail system that would negatively impact wildlife, and I would be more than surprised if it did negatively impact the existing wildlife.
And most of the facilities that we work with, whether they're a park, whether they're roadways and so forth, we usually try to encourage and enhance the area for wildlife, of course. And certainly in this case, the facilities currently out there have been mowed quite a bit. So the fact of some of the types of wildlife that you're used to having out there probably aren't there now, but the fact of the matter is we will be probably encouraging more wildlife because we are going to have water features. We talked about the rain gardens. We talked about the bioswales. Those type of things will encourage more wildlife in those areas. So I believe you're going to see a net effect as it's probably a better wildlife condition than what's out there today.
That actually brings up a great question that, we have the opportunity to not have as much grass and to not be mowing as much and to restore some of the habitat that was there before the golf course was there. So at some future point in the design process, if residents want to weigh in on that, right now you have a very manicured kind of looking landscape that's not natural at all. So the question is, how far do you want to go towards restoration?
And that somewhat speaks to the next question that we have, but there's an added, it says to
Yeah.
encourage the native wildlife and vegetation, can you stop using herbicides?
Yeah, to my knowledge, we've not had that discussion yet. And I don't know, again, within the Parks Department, if you all have discussed it, but it's certainly something we should talk about.
Thank you. The coyotes are howling every evening, not at 3 a.m., 6 to 10 p.m. I've seen them behind my house at dusk. Several animals have been killed and several complaints have been made to the city. I was told to hire a trapper. So, Brad,
Yeah, I can research that tomorrow with the Florida Wildlife Commission and find out what our options are in that regard.
And just so we're clear, I mean, the coyotes have certainly become an issue throughout all over the country, to be honest with you, but in South Florida specifically, and some of the communities we have, obviously we encourage our people to be more protective of their dogs and their small animals and so forth and pets. But you are allowed to, the city is allowed to get a permit and have trappers come in and do these things if they become significant nuisances. And they've done that in various areas in Martin County, specifically around the airport. They did that. So there's a way you can have that done. Of course, we certainly want to just remind everybody that, be careful and watchful of your pets, because we may trap some one day and some more walk through the area in 30 days later. So, we'll keep our eye on it. And I think that's something that it's allowed. And again, it's a nuisance that everybody's been putting up with lately, and I suspect we're going to see more of it. But the only way to do it is to control it.
okay. Thank you. Dylan, did you have something you wanted to add? You have to go to, yeah.
I don't want to make suggestions. We could suggest to monitor for them if we wanted to, if it was something that wanted to be a part of this project.
Well, I think like any project like this, first of all, before we do anything, you're going to do a study on the environment, like everybody questioned about the wildlife and so forth. That gets done on just about every project we work on in the city. The second thing is, if there's an item of a nuisance like a coyote, you would monitor that for a while, and then basically you'd apply for a permit and talk to some of the Fish and Wildlife people and talk about what can we do to control the coyotes. And they're experts on this now, and so we would do that in this case, and being that there's already been a complaint mentioned tonight.
Okay. Next question, is parking allowed on the roads along the area? Brad?
Unless posted, no parking. It is my understanding the city code allows parking in the right-of-way in the direction of traffic. So unless it's specifically posted no parking, I believe it's allowed under the city code.
Thank you. Next question, any possible restaurants interested in going in on the water in the botanical gardens? Jen, you want to take that one?
Sure. We recently engaged Colliers International to help us with the restaurant search. And as recently as this week, we did speak with the CRA board and city council about the possibility of maybe not just one restaurant, but maybe a small cluster of restaurants, and have some sort of dining experience at the site as opposed to just the one facility. So we're working on that right now. Our intention would be to try to have that, if we could have it open when we open up the park and open up the segment under the bridge and all that, we will. If not, we will get it done as soon as possible thereafter.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, the wooded area has been discussed as a possible location for meandering trails. It is noted that current trail paths do not reflect entry into the wooded and wetland areas. A large part of the wooded area is privately owned by the Visconti community. If the wooded areas were to be accessed, would the city place signs noting the wooded areas that are private property to deter trespassing by park users? What would be done to deter those who would go off trail and into the privately owned wooded areas?
Yeah, so this starts with us, again, going to the site analysis level that Joe talked about. The way to deter is to not route the trail anywhere near private property, right? So if we decide to meander into the woods, you wouldn't do it all right along the property boundary. You'd make sure you leave a buffer. So it'd be very difficult for somebody to go off the trail. So yeah, the intent is to pay full respect to private property rights, to not encourage anybody to go meander off, not make it easy for anyone to go meander off, and provide a buffer to private property. So yeah, I don't think that should be a concern.
Thank you. So this is more of a comment. It says, FYI, the wooded areas is inhabited by bobcats and a variety of other animals, including birds, and have created a bit of a sanctuary.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think it's very appropriately named then, right? Wilderness Park, Wilderness Trail. Thank you for that. Can a playground for the kids be planned? To that end, across the street, if you will, at the Pioneer Park or the Port Playground, Pioneer Park, we have a design that is almost complete. We will be going to construction within the next year. And we hope to have that playground, and it is the WOW playground of the city, so stay tuned. We're looking forward to that being completed construction probably the end of 2022. So, yeah, stay tuned for that.
That's what would be considered a destination playground. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
So I don't see any other open questions right now, so we'll give it a few minutes to see if anybody has anything else they'd like to ask. While we're waiting, Dr. Barth, Joe, and Dylan, anybody have any final comments you'd like to put out?
I'm just delighted with the number of people who showed up to give us their comments. So thank you very much, and stay tuned. Kelly, if people want to stay in touch and understand where we are in the process, they should do what? Check the website? Or
We actually just created a landing page for our Trails project, so that's www.cityofpsl/trails. So you can get any of the new... Did I forget the .com? Oh, Avi, it's always correcting me. I'm sorry. cityofpsl.com/trails. So if you go to the city's website, you can find any new information. You'll also be able to, again, find this recording next week, along with a survey that we would love for you to fill out, forward on to your family and friends, and anyone else that you think might be interested in our wilderness trail.
yeah. Susan had a question, how many showed up? I had that we were up to about 42 people. Did that include the panel?
Yes, that did.
Yeah.
37 attendees.
Great. Yeah, very good.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope, just stay engaged.
Stay engaged.
It's going to be exciting. It's a wildlife trail, and it's a beautiful area, and the neighborhood I think will find it a great amenity for their own use and for other city residents. So it's a lot going on there.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else for tonight, we really appreciate your attendance. We appreciate your input and engagement. Again, that website is www.cityofpsl.com/trails. So you can find this recording and the survey that will be posted there early next week. Again, thank you for attending. Did we have one question before we leave?
Yeah, Susan wanted to know where we should find the recording, and you just said at that website. So
There we go. Okay, so very good. So if you have any questions, again, when you watch the recording, my contact information is on that last slide. Again, I'm Kelly Boatwright, Project Manager for Parks and Recreation, and we thank you all for attending tonight.
thank you all.